hom声，听转妙法论，教导我们如何了生脱死，离苦得乐，速证无生。Will the Sangha with great virtue, out of compassion, for the sacred disassembly and all living beings, please turn the wonderful Dharma wheel to teach us how to live suffering and attain bliss and end birth and death and quickly realize non-birth.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa.
Homage to the blessed, noble, and perfectly enlightened one.
Homage to the blessed, noble, and perfectly enlightened one.
Namo sadanto suchedoye alahadi sannyao samputoshe.
Namo sadanto suchedoye alahadi sanmiao samputoshe.
上甚深微妙法，百千万劫难遭遇。我今见闻得受持，愿皆如来真实义。Supreme and wondrous Dharma, subtle and profound, rarely is encountered, even in billions of eons. But now we see and hear it and accept it reverently. May we truly understand the Buddha's actual meaning. Venerable Master, Dharma friends, Shifu Shangren, Gowei Shishung Dadia, Ami Tofo. Welcome to our Sutra lecture today. It is Sunday, August 21st, here in the Gold Coast of Queensland. It is Saturday, August 20th, back in California. We are about to launch into this week's investigation of the Flower Garland Sutra, the Huayan Jing. And to get us going, we have two more pieces of protocol. One is to invoke spiritual presence. And we're going to do that with a melody here. People are welcome to join me. If you'd like to put your palms together and in your heart, ask the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas to come and bring their light along with them. Here we go. Namo then we would like to acknowledge country to say that the Kombumeri people of the Ugambi language group practice their connections to their spiritual connections to land, to living beings, and to all creation here in this location for tens of thousands of years. So today we acknowledge them as the traditional custodians of this land. We acknowledge them with gratitude as we share this land today, with sorrow for the costs of that sharing, and with hope that we can move to a place of justice and partnership together. We acknowledge their wisdom and their elders, past, present, and emerging, and acknowledge all First Nations peoples whose sovereignty was never ceded. When I'm back in California, I will be doing the same, only the traditional custodians of the land there will be different. It'll be the Pomo and the Miwok, and the indigenous tribes whose wisdom kept the forests from burning. It's so gratifying to see state of California forestry officials saying we need to learn from how the First Nations peoples managed the forest fires, because it's not the case that these forests didn't burn, but they knew how to do it, so they didn't all burn at once. So there are now initiatives in California to go back and learn the traditional ways of forest management, as because what the white folks have going isn't working. So, alrighty, today we're going to be looking at, let me set the stage. The Buddha is teaching a collection of Dharma practices called the 10 Practices. That's the name of the big chapter where he is now. And it's followed by another chapter called the 10 Inexhaustible Treasuries, the 10 storehouses that never run out. Those are the two main teachings that are coming up. And he's doing that lecture in one of the heavens, which is kind of amazing to think about, that the Avatamsaka dharmas are taught throughout different levels of the heavens. He's in a heaven called the Suyama heaven now, and we've witnessed how the deva in charge of that heaven invited the Buddha, set it all up, invited the audience, and then personally he himself lit incense, walked around, bowed, knelt down, and said, so glad you're here. You know, I have witnessed 10 other Buddhas come and do the same thing, and you're next. And he told the story about how 10 Buddhas came, and their presence made this place the most auspicious of places. And we didn't spend much time with that particular point, but I will say that when I was a graduate student, I had a room in a boarding house. I and two couples who found their way to this nice boarding house in the foothills of Berkeley, California. I had a room, and we shared the bathrooms and kitchens. And my room was okay. I studied there, and I slept there, and I, took care of my clothes and my bicycle and things. But it wasn't until I dedicated a corner of the room to a meditation space. And in order to do that, I went to Asian Imports and got a screen, a 3-panel screen, set it up, and just set aside one of the square corners of my room. I blocked it off, put my meditation cushion inside, and a little tiny table with a flower and an image of the Buddha. And every morning I would get up, rinse my mouth, wash my face, and kind of try my best to wake up and go behind the screen and sit in that corner of the room. And often my mind was so foggy that it took me half an hour of sitting before I actually kind of remembered who I was and what I was doing. It was, being a college graduate student, mind is often foggy. So sitting there, it never failed that going into that corner of the room improved my day and gave me an anchor, gave me a focus, gave me clarity, and I just felt like all of my energy found its center. I felt like I was home inside myself simply by the act of going behind that screen to meditate and face to face with my little Buddha image, which was just a tiny, ordinary Buddha image. And no dirty clothes found their way into that portion of my room. My cats were not encouraged to go. I had 2 cats that I raised, and they couldn't go there either. And I would always bring them out, and put them on the bed, or if they, somewhere else when they landed in that corner. But just it was so humble, and yet the conscious act of saying, this is a special space, made it auspicious. And it enhanced my life in so many ways. And it was, of course, just an illusion. It's just, I decided that was the boundary. And this was one room in a boarding house. Now, if you have your own home, of course, you can set up something quite lovely. But having that presence and what it does to your mind when you go there makes it the most auspicious. And in my experience, homes that have a Buddha hall dedicated like that, or it doesn't have to be Buddhist, mind you, as long as you have a place in your home where your thoughts clean up there, where profanity isn't allowed, where you don't bring drinks in, you don't party in there. You try not to think mean and angry, nasty, vengeful, victimized thoughts. Try to clean your mind up in that space. And the result is, every time you set foot in that space, you find your way back home. So that's why it's the most auspicious. So here's our Deva. My goodness, the Buddha himself has come to the Suyama heaven. So he says, that's why this place is the most auspicious. Don't you know? If the Buddha himself shows up, that is the lucky of luckies, right? In fact, it's not luck, it's blessings, it's hard work that brings the Buddha to that heaven. And you have to put out a little effort to make that corner of room special and auspicious, but it really pays off, in my experience. So that's the stage, that's where we are. 10 bodhisattvas have arrived. The number 1, their leader, is named Forest of Merit and Virtue, Gongdo-lin Pusa. So Forest of Merit and Virtue has led 9 other bodhisattvas to the hall in the Suyama heaven. They, in turn, one by one, are arranging their robes and getting themselves prepared to take incense, walk around the Buddha, bow down, kneel, and then sing to him. They sing praises, sing songs, and we get to listen. We get to hear the songs they sing. So this chapter is called Verses in Praise from a Palace in the Suyama Heaven. That's the name of the chapter, and it's just a collection of songs. The Bible has psalms. These are Buddhist psalms, Ben. Did you realize that? Buddhist psalms. That's what this could be called. Buddhist psalms from the Suyama heaven. They're not to King David. Although today, I wanted to say, for the lecture today, I'm going to give you the remaining, I think it's five verses that finish the praises sung by Forest of Victory Bodhisattva, Sheng Lin Pusa. But then, in order to elaborate on one of the teachings that he's singing about, I'm going to go take a slightly roundabout route and introduce 2 more documents. One is a song, and the other comes from another scripture entirely. I'll let you know when I get there. So in order to explain what makes Buddhism different among other faith traditions, I'm going to take a little roundabout journey today. So please come with me and enjoy. So we'll share the screen. And here's today's text. It's 1, 2, 3, 4 today. 4 more verses. Okay, here we go. And I'll do the Chinese first. Here we go, ready? 诸法无生故，自性无所有，如是分别智，此人大圣义。We'll go all the way down. 依法无性故，无有能了知，如是皆于法，究竟无所解。所说有生者，一现诸国度，能知国度性，其心不迷惑。世间国度性，观察悉如是。若能于此知，善说一切义。Okay, that's the 4 verses in Chinese. Here we go. Now these are, the way the English works in these, it's not very poetically organized, but we'll do our best. Ready? Here we go. Because dharmas have no birth, and inherent nature does not exist, one who knows this about dharmas truly gets the deepest meaning. Because dharmas have no nature, nobody can know them. Someone who understands this truth about dharmas knows there is nothing to understand. The Buddha only talks about creation in order to make Buddha lands appear. One who truly understands the nature of lands will not be confused about them. The nature of lands in the world, when someone observes them as they are, if you can know them in this way, you'll be able to skillfully explain all things. Somebody goes, it's not ready for the top 40. Yeah, but okay. Now, what is going on? We are deconstructing everything. The nature of reality just fell apart in the last 4 verses. Boom. There is reality in pieces on the floor, like a kid who is tired of his Lego castle and kicks it, right? All the pieces. Dharmas have no birth, and inherent nature does not exist. If you know this about dharmas, you get the deepest meaning. If you are a rationalist, if you are a very practical person, you go, nonsense. That's utter nonsense. What do you mean dharmas have no birth? What do you mean a nature doesn't exist? So the Buddha says, I stand behind my statement. It's true. From my point of view, from the wisdom that I am using, which is like a mirror, not like a celery, not like a bok choy cleaver. A butcher knife goes chop, 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 chop. 分别知, cuts everything in small pieces. It's called reductionism. You know the biggest by looking at the smallest. And if you can take it down to the atomic structure, you can know the macro, the biggest. That's science's way of knowledge. And it leads to many of our greatest discoveries, that way of approaching. The Buddha says, without denying that ability to learn through chopping things up into smaller pieces that we can know, languages, for example, alphabets, syntax, grammar, poetry, right? We're not denying that. He's saying, however, let's step back and look at language itself and understand what it's trying to do. It's trying to convey something that keeps vanishing. So I'm going to use wisdom that puts everything back into one piece and reflect it like a mirror. From that point of view, dharmas have no birth. And inherent nature doesn't exist. Can you understand that about dharmas? You get the deepest meaning. Not the shallow meaning, but the deepest meaning. Okay, so far so good. There's a name for the teachings of the Buddha, which is called, what's it called? Truth in the primary sense, D-E-E-D in Chinese, number one meaning principle, which is what? Simply no self. You say that's what the Buddha woke up to. He woke up to the reality that the self that we take as so important is just a way of looking. It's a habit. That the self that is in the center of all my dealings with the world, that self is just a temporary sticking together of stories that we've heard. Starting with what? In the womb. Mom patting her tummy, probably giving you your name and singing to you before you're born. And that's how the self begins. And on further, you get your toys. They're different from your siblings' toys. And you go to school and you get your grades. And you got your chair at the dinner table. And pretty soon you've got your own wardrobe, your own style, your own self, your own stories. They just, my goodness. Then that self begins to interact with the world, and you cannot lose. The current political muddle that the United States finds itself in has to do with these stories. Stories that must be one way and cannot be another way. So the Buddha went backwards. He unmade the self. He deeply investigated through sitting still, through a process of hard work and clear focus, and discovered that he couldn't find any core to the story of the self. It just kept falling apart. There was no way to pin down, this is me, and it's different from any you. It's not. It just kept breaking, And he came up with this principle that, bless his heart, Dr. Nakasone, my kind-hearted advisor, calls the major contribution of Buddhism to world religions, which is called pratitya samutpada, conditioned arising. He says this is the unique Buddhist contribution from his point of view, which is the idea that all things come together, the story of the self and all that, come together when the conditions are ripe. And when those conditions no longer support, it's over. From this interpretation comes all kinds of things like impermanence and emptiness, no self. Dr. Nakasone says this is the core teaching. This is the Buddha's main insight that no other religion says in this way. And so you think, well, what's included? Well, my body, for example, is included. Everything that I've done, everything that I will do, are all made of conditions that come together, except two. There are two features of reality that are unconditioned. One is space itself. So this, right? I'm holding a handful of space right here. And the other is nirvana, which is not created and doesn't go away. But nirvana is not a state that I can buy or sell or name or own, or has no color, no velocity, no shape. So we'll take that one on faith. But dharmas have no birth and inherent nature doesn't exist. If you know that about dharmas, you get to the deepest meaning, which is the self is just a way of looking. Now, is that helpful? Yeah, you don't take yourself so seriously. And you can do what the Bible, I told you we were going far afield today. Do what the Bible advises, which is turn to every different situation. Wisdom knows when and how much and where. No wisdom is always off. It's always too much or not enough, and it's the wrong time, right? So trouble results. So if you know this about dharmas, you get the deepest meaning, and you are free to respond appropriately to every circumstance. No matter what it is, you're right on, just enough, at the right time, for the right person. And things work out with that knowledge. So, okay, moving on here. Because dharmas have no nature, nobody can know them. If you understand that about dharmas, you know there's nothing to understand. That's cold. It's like, no, there's nothing to know, nothing to understand. Did you, when you read the Heart Sutra for the first time, did you get to that line and kind of blink? No knowing and no attaining. Wu zhi yi wu de. There's nothing to know and nothing to get. Yi wu so de gu puti sato. Because there's nothing to get, the bodhisattva, using prajnaparamita, realizes the Buddha's enlightenment. So you say, well, that's nice to know, but I'm a mom and I have children at home. I have a lot to understand. Thank you very much. I have to get them vaccinated. Oh, what if you got a job? You have so much to understand. You have to know traffic. You have to know best route in case there's an accident on the M1 and you've got to go around it to get to work on time. There's a lot to understand. What does the Buddha mean? There's nothing to understand. So he is talking about ultimate meaning here and praising the Buddha who is about to teach on this topic. So we're looking at a praise, a poem, a song, where he's saying the Buddha shows this. This is the new normal for wise people. If you know there's nothing to understand, what happens? Suffering ends for you. That doesn't mean you don't go to work. That doesn't mean you don't teach your kids. That doesn't mean you don't, call your mom. So we go wrong when we try to interpret this to an extreme, but in itself, this is to establish a baseline of ultimate reality. This is so liberating because we don't have to struggle so much. We don't have to take it all so seriously when things fall apart. And when they go right, we don't have to gloat or get drunk, with joy and then get thrown off center. So having this as your downbeat, as your bottom line, is the joy of studying the Dharma. It's a new normal, the real new normal. Okay, then there are two final verses that goes from the self out to the world. He says, the Buddha only talks about creation in order to make Buddha lands appear. If you understand the nature of lands, you won't be confused in your mind. Only has he deconstructed himself and said fundamentally it's like a mirage, it's like a play, it's like a show on TV. The world around us is the very same way. So Buddha makes Buddha lands appear to help us wake up. But if you understand them, you don't take it seriously. Last verse, the nature of lands in the world, when you see them the way they are, do you know how they are? If so, you can skillfully explain all things. Okay, I'm going to pop my face back up. There we go. Now, Master Hua was this, had a remarkable intellect. Shifu was like a kid in a candy store when it was time to learn something new. He was endlessly fascinated by the world around him. They say in Chinese, 活到老,学到老. No matter how long you live, you study your whole life long. And that was really his way. He was a born educator because why? Shifu was fascinated by knowledge. I'll never forget coming into a Buddha hall. We were visiting in New York City, Chinatown, and we went into a temple on Mott Street, I believe. And the monk there was an old Dharma buddy of Master Hua's. And Shifu looked at every piece of furniture in the temple from the point of view of how well made it was, whether material had been wasted, whether it was too wide, whether it was sturdy, whether it was decorated, appropriately and all. And you could just see him running his fingers over everything and checking it all out inside the monastery. And then he turned to us and said, "Notice how well made this is. Not a single bit of material is wasted, but it functions perfectly. And it's very nice. He didn't waste a penny on this, and yet it does its job just right." So efficiency and being, what's the word, frugality, all of those things matter to him. And he noticed everything. Shifu then said, we're going to have this conference at City of 10,000 Buddhas this week. We're going to bring the theologians down from Humboldt State University with their students and their monastic encounter. He said, "This is really a good program that you got set up here." He said, "I want you to use the sutra's principles, use the principles of the Avatamsaka Sutra when you talk to these professors." He said, "Why?" He says, "If you understand the principles of the Avatamsaka Sutra, there is no field of knowledge that you will not be able to deeply understand. The principles of the Avatamsaka Sutra are the foundation of knowledge," he said. And it's like, okay, I never quite saw it that way. And then when you run into a phrase like this, here's Bodhisattva Forest of Victory: "The nature of lands in the world, when somebody observes them the way they are, if you can know things in this way, you'll be able to skillfully explain absolutely everything." Here's the Bodhisattva saying what Shifu said, or maybe the other way around. Maybe Shifu was preparing us to hear what the Bodhisattva was saying. So that's the idea that is the sutra just a nice, an ancient wisdom book that we study on Sundays or Saturdays and then put back in the cabinet? Well, you can, nothing wrong with that. But it's much more exciting when the principles of the sutra light up the world around you and help you find a way to live in harmony with it. So your days go with more wisdom and you make fewer mistakes. That's I think, kind of the spirit of Master Hua's establishing Dharma Realm Buddhist University, is to open the sutras up. And I want to say here that it's important that we get our fingerprints on the sutras. I've been to lots and lots of Buddhist monasteries and centers where the sutras are put in a glass case, and you respectfully close the glass case, sometimes even lock it, and dust it a couple times a week, and that's where the sutras are. And you got them, and you're proud of them, and they radiate light and all, but you never open them. And I know in my heart that Shifu wanted us to not be afraid to get our fingers on the texts, even to the point of, carrying them around with you, putting them in a bag. You don't toss them on the floor, you don't cover them with newspapers, but you get them out and read them. And I know there's what you call 莫名其妙的规矩, these wonderful rules that nobody knows quite where the rules came from, that say things like, if you defile this sutra, if you breathe on it, you can't breathe on the sutra, or if you touch it with your fingers after you rubbed your face, you're going to lose your eyesight in the future. You won't be able to hear anybody's voice, promising all kinds of harm to come to you if you actually interact with the sutra. That's why they're called 莫名其妙. Where do these rules come from? These are infamous rules that nobody really believes. But they're just there to scare you so that no one will challenge someone who doesn't have knowledge of the sutras. I think that's probably the motive for these rules. Anyway, Shifu wanted us to get the sutras. Ideally, the best way, what he really recommended was memorizing them, of course. So, short of that, because it's a long book, if we can take these principles and say, all right, so for example, what is the nature of lands in the world? And how do I observe them? Ru Shi, as they really are. That's my name, Heng Shi. Look at them as they really are. And if you can know them this way, you can understand and explain everything skillfully. Give me an example, says the skeptic, right? Tell me, what do you mean by that? All right, well, here's one. I yesterday had the opportunity to explain a verse from the Song of Awakening, Chung Dao Ge. And yes, we are going to go there in order to explain the Avatamsaka, because I think it's fascinating. What makes the Dharma so satisfying to study is the way it puts the way it balances Western contributions to knowledge, typically science, with this mirror-like wisdom, prajna wisdom. So it rounds it out, puts it in perspective. Here's the verse from Song of Awakening, Chung Dao Ge, that we looked at yesterday. Here it is, right there it is. Okay. I'm going to actually approach it the way we do when we study it. I'm doing a shameless advertisement for our Saturday morning lecture series. It's Friday noon in America. Master Hua does it this way. Am I share my screen? Let me share my screen. Master Hua approaches it this way. He goes, He da kong bo yin guo, mang mang tang tang zhao yang huo, qi you zhao kong bing yi ran, you ru bi ni er tu huo. Something like that in the original Chinese, okay? We translated it and we went like this. Some folks stick to emptiness, deny cause and effect. They run amok, predictably they call a sorry fate. Ignore existence, you go wrong by clinging to the void, like one who leaps into a fire, escaping from a flood. Actually, that phone ring is, I think that's a D. Okay, so here's what happens. Some folks stick to emptiness, deny cause and effect. They run amok, predictably. They call a sorry fate. Ignore existence, you'll go wrong by clinging to the void, like one who leaps into a fire, escaping from a flood. What's going on here? This is a Tang Dynasty song meant to be sung. I don't know if they meant it to be sung with a banjo, but well, this is Australia. We can do what we want here. So the point is, a meditator who is midway in his or her progress in meditation may encounter this state called emptiness. Master Yongjia, his name was Master Xuanjue, but he was from Yongjia. They name him by his place. He is warning the mid-level meditator not to attach to a state of emptiness. But he doesn't stop there. He also says, don't attach to existence either. Because either one of the extremes, nihilism, nothing exists, or eternalism, everything always exists, emptiness or existence, are both dead ends for meditators who want to see their own mind in action. Okay, how does that sound to Forest of Victory Bodhisattva? He's saying, what is the primary meaning? That if you get that meaning, you'll understand everything. That's the emptiness of self and dharmas. Okay, we're on the track. You following here? This is new information, right? So here's a Tong Dynasty monk who was certified by the sixth patriarch as having seen his mind. This is the one who had the argument with the sixth patriarch, remember? About he came in and he stomped his monk's staff, didn't bow to the sixth patriarch, and the sixth patriarch examined him and said, yep, okay, you're good. And then the master from Yongjia turned around and said, okay, I'm going back. And the sixth patriarch says, hey, spend the night at least. So he became known as the overnight enlightened one. So yeah, he spent one night and went back and taught for the next 30 years and left behind this incredible song called Zheng Dao Ge, Song of Awakening, Song of Enlightenment. So the Song of Enlightenment, as we look into it, has got total randomness in terms of how the internal structure of his 63 verses. There seems to be no particular order that I can tell. I think the Song of Enlightenment came about because this is what people were singing in the monastery at that time. There's some of these verses kind of remind you of jump rope chants. You know, my mother says to choose the very best one, and O-U-T means out you go. Some of them have that flavor of, you know, folk rhythms, folk melodies. Other times it's profound, deep prajna wisdom. Other times it's a travelogue. He's going out in the mountains, out in the forests, and he's talking about how sublime is the stillness out there. Other times he's praising the mirror of the mind. We had that verse last week. So here, what is he doing? This is meditation advice. Some folks stick to emptiness. What do? They deny cause and effect. Big mistake. If you say, oh man, I'm just my state, you know, it's all empty, so who cares what I do? I'm going to do what I want. It's empty anyway. Remember, I think I've told that story before. I actually witnessed this myself. And if you've heard it, don't stop me, because you're going to hear it again. All right, it's a great story. Helen Wu, one of our earliest disciples, invited Master Hua down to Los Angeles. She came to Gold Mountain and just started crying spontaneously, face to face with Shifu. Shifu said, don't cry, you come home. And this was someone who, she had been Miss Chinatown in a beauty pageant winner and lived quite a freewheeling lifestyle until she met Master Hua, and then suddenly she kind of remembered where she really came from. So she invited Shifu down to LA, and we were going to do a refuge ceremony, the first time that this had been done by Master Hua in LA. I was a brand new monk. I think I'd put on my robe for a month at that point, and everything was new to me as in my role as bhikshu. I rang the bell. I was the ceremony master and all. So we were in Helen Wu's house in Pasadena, South Pasadena, and all of Chinatown, Los Angeles, had turned out to meet this famous Chan monk from San Francisco, Shang Shen Xiahua Lao Heshang. Here was Master Hua. And so here were all the bigwigs. Here were the politicians. They came, the Chinatown politicians. Here were all the restaurateurs. They came down. And the Buddhists from other groups showed up, and all of the martial artists, all of the sifus came to check out because they had heard that Master Hua was the real thing, and they wanted to see if he was going to come into their territory and if they had to like defend their students from being taken over by Master Hua. It was quite a scene. Oh my goodness. And I was there to translate in case anybody showed up. Oh, this is, I should tell another, this is one of those unforgettable stories. There was, I'll tell my, I'm not going to digress from my digression. I'll stick to my first digression first. So after the, we were about to start lunch, and everybody had kind of gone in to find their place. There was one guy hanging out back where Master Hua was sitting on the sofa. I was sitting beside him, and there was this one character, and he had a kind of a Marlon Brando pose, leaning on the door like this, and had his eyes kind of half shut, kind of giving Master Hua the once over. And I could tell that this guy had something on his mind. And Shifu, sitting on the couch, went very soft. I could feel kind of the balance as he was preparing to encounter whatever this guy was going to throw at him. And it really had the feeling of a Western movie and a gunfight, and the sheriff is standing in the street, and the young gunfighter steps on wearing a black hat. The sheriff has got the white hat on, and they're kind of standing like this, ready, who's going to draw first. And so this guy, he was wearing black, he had on martial arts clothes, and he was definitely out to shoot the sheriff, no doubt. And so he says, he says, 如果一切空, 那何必修行呢? He says, if everything is empty, why bother cultivating? He said. And then he turned, kind of like, that was it. That was my shot, my best shot. Master Hua says, 如果一切空, 那何必问呢? Shifu says, if everything's really empty, why do you have to ask? He said. And the guy just wilted. He's watching him. He just wilted. And he dropped his head and went and got a plate and had lunch, you know. So the sheriff returned the shot and disarmed the challenger. And I mean, what a wonderful comeback, right? If everything is empty, why bother cultivating? So, you know, this is very much like teaching Buddhist philosophy. Those of you who have ever tried to teach a Buddhist philosophy course, my guess is more than half of you have had this experience. You give an exam, you're the professor at a Buddhist course in Buddhism, and somebody hands in their essay book and it's empty, it's blank. And they say, I realized emptiness. I'm proving it with my essay. Not a word on the page. So as Master Hua said, okay, if everything's empty, why do you have to ask? You're asking simply because you want to be known as somebody who doesn't want to cultivate, right? No, if it's really empty, you wouldn't even want the fame, the reputation of somebody who, you know, knew it was all empty. So like the student, so the answer to the student is, so you realized emptiness. You won't mind if I give you an empty grade, then I'll certainly grade you according to your effort, which is 0. You know, oh, well, give me a minute, I'm going to write. So, yeah, so Master the Yongjia says what? He says, if you stick to emptiness and deny cause and effect, you feel that because you now have realized emptiness, therefore cause and effect no longer applies to you. You run amok predictably and call a sorry fate. You will discover that cause and effect has not let you go. Sadly, you are still responsible for the results of your actions. There are consequences for your actions. If you call an armed insurrection down on the nation's capital, there will be consequences. You don't get off free for doing that. So, but then, now look, the next line is so interesting. He says, ignore existence, you'll go wrong by clinging to the void. He said, don't get stuck in permanence either. That's also wrong. And by avoiding both extremes of nihilism, where everything's empty, and permanence, where everything is always the same, you get the roundness of the Dharma, and he pushes us back into the middle way, which is prajna wisdom, being able to reflect perfectly and at the same time be really good with your knowledge of the small pieces that reductionism provides us. Okay, he says, otherwise what? You're like somebody who leaps into a fire trying to escape a flood. Out of the frying pan into the fire. That's the English idiom. So thank you, Master Yongjia, for giving us the Buddhist version of emptiness, which is what? Emptiness is a verb. Emptiness is a verb. You empty out, but it fills again immediately. Nature doesn't do vacuums, right? So it fills back up, you empty it out again. Apply that to the mind, and let's say I've got a nasty thought. I'm really, really upset with somebody I am related to, somebody I sometimes love, but occasionally I don't love as much. And I feel bad because I have those nasty thoughts about them. What do? Empty out your mind. That's just a thought. That's not the nature of that person. Your reaction to your loved one is no reflection on that person. Because why? All dharmas are ultimately empty. So empty it out. The Buddha is not making a statement when he says empty. This is not an existential statement about, well, I take it back. He is indeed doing that. Forest of Victory is saying that. But it's not a static state. It fills again, and so you empty it out. Now, when I said Buddhism takes emptiness as a verb, I was corrected by one of our Dharma friends on the lecture yesterday. He says, he said, actually, in the Madhyamaka teachings, which is one school that grew up around Nagarjuna, he said, this is from India that was picked up and strongly influenced Chinese Buddhism. He says, emptiness is very much a noun. I'm sorry, it's the other way around. In the Yogacara teachings, he said, emptiness is a noun. It's in the Madhyamaka teachings where it's a verb, to empty. You empty it out. Where do we see this? We've heard about Vipassana meditation, where you contemplate. You contemplate how all things rise in the mind and then fall in the mind. You observe. And in this case, the emptiness of all things is apparent. It's a noun. But in the Chan school, in our shamatha school, where we empty out the mind, you sweep away, you take your Vajra sword and cut through all dharmas. That way you don't have to be so guilty when you think bad thoughts about your partner or your kids. Do you ever say to your kids, drop dead? I wouldn't say such a thing more than 10 times a day, right? Never 20 times a day. So yeah, it's hard to stay related to people with whom we are making our lives, but with the wisdom of emptying out, we can see that is not fundamental. The dislike, the difficulty, the irritation, the affliction that we get from having to accord with other human beings is not fundamental. It's a state of the mind, the same way, what does your garden grow? Your garden grows weeds and flowers both. So you weed your garden. And understand that they probably are thinking similar thoughts about you, and you just hope that they're weeding the way you would like your garden to be weeded, right? So either one, thinking that they're perfect is wrong. Thinking that they're nasty and evil is wrong. As Master Yongjia says, Should you one day in your meditation experience a state of emptiness, that is a sign of progress along the path towards samadhi, mind you. You're a mid-level meditator, and you claim that cause and effect no longer applies to you because everything is empty. You have just attached to an extreme view. You are midway towards success in meditation. You've taken the first step down a slippery slope that will inevitably lead to disaster if you don't empty emptiness. But if you attach to an extreme view and leave the truth of the middle way, if you calculate on radical existence, you make the same basic mistake on the other side of duality. You jump out of the frying pan into the fire. So neither horn of the dilemma will bring you closer to your original mind and the realization of the way. All right? Interesting, huh? So there, we're going to swap right back to the Bodhisattva, and he says, here we go. He says, because dharmas have no birth and inherent nature doesn't exist, if you know this about dharmas, you truly get the deepest meaning, the emptiness of the self. Dharmas have no nature. Nobody can know them. You can't grab a dharma because it keeps changing, and the act of grabbing it changes it. Someone who understands that truth knows that ultimately nothing stands still. There's nothing to understand about the self. However, apply that same truth to the world around you. The Buddha talks about creation to make Buddha lands appear so that we can use what we're given to cultivate our way out of the karmic matrix that we find ourselves in. Being male is not ultimate. Being female is not ultimate. It's, like all things, a combination of conditions that come together. If we don't like it, change it. Make a different combination. That's the world, and skillful use of that allows us to transform suffering and to teach the people who we care about how to transform their suffering. The nature of lands in the world, if you observe them as they are, you can know them in this way, and you'll skillfully be able to explain all things. All right. How interesting that Buddhism in China was known as Kongmen, the gateway to emptiness. This teaching was so fundamental to the Dharma that it became the nickname, the tag by which Chinese referred to Buddhism, the gateway of emptiness. To be able to understand this and then use it skillfully. I'm going to switch now. I mentioned 3 texts, the Sutra, the Song of Awakening, and then one more that I want to share with everybody. And this one more is from another book called the Holy Bible. Oh, using the Bible to explain emptiness. How does that work? Well, it's not so much emptiness, it's how you, faced with emptiness, deal with the world skillfully to make a positive difference. And the answer is, it's called Fangbian Zhihui in Chinese, expedient wisdom. Expedient wisdom says, to everything, turn, turn, turn. Pete Seeger, bless his heart, put it to a melody from the book of Ecclesiastes. To everything, turn, turn, turn. There is a season, turn, turn, turn. And a time to every purpose under heaven. A time to be born, a time to die, a time to plant, a time to reap, a time to kill, a time to heal, a time to laugh, a time to weep. To everything turn, turn, turn. There is a season, turn, 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 and a time to every purpose under heaven. A time to build up, a time to break down, a time to dance, a time to mourn, a time to cast away stones, a time to gather stones together. To everything turn, turn, turn. There is a season, turn, 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 and a time to every purpose under heaven. A time of love, a time of hate, a time of war, a time of peace, a time you may embrace, a time to refrain from embracing. You can join me last time through. To everything turn, turn, turn. There is a season, turn, 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 and a time to every purpose under heaven. A time to gain, a time to lose, a time to rend, a time to sow, a time for love, a time of hate, a time for peace. I swear it's not too late. To everything turn, turn, turn. There is a season, turn, 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 and a time to every purpose under heaven. Now, where's that from? That's from the book of Ecclesiastes. Oh, I knew that. Right, from the Holy Bible. Now, the point I would like to make is that there is something unique about the Dharma here that shows us how different Buddhism is from other religions that get almost to the same place, but not quite. What do I mean by that? So here we were explaining the Song of Enlightenment yesterday, and excuse me one second, gotta bring this up. Here we are. Shravasti keeps popping up here. Sorry, here we go, right here. Okay, so we talked about the gateway of emptiness, and the Buddha is not saying to us, everything's empty, give up. Everything's in vain. Everything is useless. Everything is over and done, fated somehow, and you can just kind of sit still and wait your fate. Not at all. Look at how the Buddha wants us to approach this state of emptiness. He says, "Tan," investigate. Just the way physics takes us deep into matter. What does it say? It says, here's an electron, here's a neutron, here's a proton, here's a nucleus of an atom. Most of the weight of that atom, when you weigh it out on an atomic scale, is empty. Most of the mass of atoms is space itself. The actual weight of the atom is only a portion of the atom of all the different elements that appear on the periodic table. So they come together only when conditions allow. Take a famous atom, H2O, water, right? Hydrogen and 2 oxygens. When you heat that, it starts to vibrate, it changes, it becomes steam. When you cool it, it becomes ice. When you melt it, it becomes water. The structure of it changes based on conditions. If you apply a lot of heat, it actually goes away. It evaporates. So how do you know that? The senses know that. What are the senses made of? Once you analyze, you realize it's emptiness looking at emptiness. How do we talk about it? We give it an empty name. Which, is it lo in French? Is it shui in Chinese? Is it mizu in Japanese? Is it water? Answer is yes. But those things themselves are made of phonemes, consonants, consonants and vowels. You know, shui, sh, wei, third tone, Chinese, water. All those things are components that come together and come apart. Everything is born of conditions and dies of conditions, including the things that we use to know. Knowledge itself is just conditional. To say the way, now, what do we say about that? Face to face. Now, Buddhism is not the only system of knowledge that has looked at that and said what the Buddha said. I'm going to give you an example. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity. The words of the preacher, the son of David, king in Jerusalem. Oh, Book of Ecclesiastes 1-3 from the Bible. Vanity of vanities, says the preacher. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity. Now, you got to do an exegesis here, like my dear friends, rabbis who do midrash. Vanity is not looking in the mirror and thinking you're pretty or handsome. It's not that. It's not vain. You're so vain. Carly Simon. It's not Carly Simon's. You're so vain. It's in vain, meaning useless. All is in vain. Give you an example. Number 3. What does man gain by all the toil at which he toils under the sun? What does woman gain by all the toils she toils in her home, at the workplace, raising kids? A generation goes, a generation comes, but the earth remains forever. The sun rises, the sun goes down, and hastens to where it came from. The wind blows to the south, goes to the north. Around and around goes the wind, and on its circuits the wind returns in vain. All streams run to the sea, but the sea is not full. To the place where the streams flow, there they flow again. Ready? All things are full of weariness. A man cannot utter it. The eye is not satisfied with seeing, nor the ear filled with hearing. What has been is what will be. What is done is what will be done. There is nothing new under the sun. Ding, ding, ding. I've heard that one before. Okay. Is there a thing of which it is said, see, this is new? It has been already in the ages before us. There is no remembrance of former things, nor will there be any remembrance of later things yet to be among those who come after. So these verses 1-3 continue. The vanity of wisdom, he says, I've seen everything done under the sun. Behold, all is vanity. It's a striving after a puff of wind. All right. So I just read from the book of Ecclesiastes to point out a difference in the Buddha's approach. What I get from reading Ecclesiastes is a sense of futility. It goes on to, there's more. This is, I'm cherry picking out of it. But what you do with this knowledge is you wait for the Savior. Saving comes through grace. The idea is, if you have any wisdom, you acknowledge that your efforts are futile, short-lived, and in vain. So don't strive. What does the Buddha say? He says, no one saves you but yourself. No one can and no one may. You yourself must walk the path. Buddhas only show the way, he says. Face to face with cause and effect and the truth of suffering, you don't stop in emptiness. You get to work. You cultivate the way. You establish merit and virtue. You invest in your bank of blessings and you share it. You give it away to others once you understand the nature of suffering. Yes, it is empty. No, don't quit. That's different. That's really a different approach. And it's one that I found much more heartful, much more compassionate. Bowing to the city of 10,000 Buddhas every day on the highway, I was proselytized. I was saved. Boy, I've been saved more than most. How come I'm so confused still? So, my goodness, these preachers would practice on me and Marty because we were traveling so slowly. Every new town that we approached, we could be seen coming closer and closer, 1 mile a day, and then in the town, through the town, going out of town, we were sitting ducks for practice preachers. And never forget being in Paso Robles, Central California, and having the preachers come out with quick draw Bible holsters, just like gunfighters. They had a holster and a well-thumbed Bible, and he would say, "What do you say, Brother Simon?" Pull it out. "I think that's a case of Ecclesiastes 1.3. Put it back in the holster. They were quick draw Bible holsters. And by golly, we were shot dead with scripture. Oh, Lord have mercy. And they, every single day, "Don't you know that God sees your efforts as nothing more than a pile of useless rags? You can't work your way to heaven. Get up from there. You expect to be saved that way?" So we went back to Shifu when the time came and said, Shifu, they ask us why are we wasting our time down there in the gutter and that we can't work our way to heaven? And Shifu said, "Okay," he said, "you be the preacher and I'll answer your question." So I said, Shifu, why are we bowing? Why are we wasting our time here? We can't work our way to heaven." Shifu looked up and smiled and said, "I bow because I like bowing. I need to bow. The world needs more bowing." He said, went back to bow. He said, "What can they say?" So I was like, okay, good. Luckily, I didn't talk. I was silent, so I didn't get myself in trouble trying to come up with a smarter answer, and I didn't waste bandwidth, coming up with, "I wish I'd said that." So every single day, preached to, saved and proselytized. So it's consistent with the system of belief, which says all is in vain. It's so, there we are. It's David speaking in the book of Ecclesiastes, which he's saying, don't strive, because wisdom tells you that it's all steady state. There's nothing new in the world. We toil under the sun, and there's nothing to be gained by it. Until that's not the whole story. What follows, interestingly, I'm going to show you right now. I'm going to share my screen. What comes up immediately after that sense of that message, all is vanity, is the vanity of toil. This verse: For everything there is a season and a time for every matter under heaven. A time to be born, a time to die. Pete Seeger dipped into the book of Ecclesiastes and pulled those teachings out for that beautiful song. Thank you, thank you. But just before it, it says, all his days are full of sorrow, his work is vexation. Even in the night, his heart does not rest. This is vanity and a striving after wind, meaning nothing more substantial than a puff of wind. How interesting. So you put them side by side, both are talking about human experience, which is something suddenly got empty. Something suddenly seemed kind of vain, kind of empty. Like, what's the point of that? You know, we elect a new administration, and 4 years later, we call them bums, we call them corrupt, and vote them out. Is this just, you know, power corrupts absolutely? Is this the best we can do? You kind of give up, you get sour, you get cynical and bitter. The Buddha Dharma doesn't stop there. It says, see it the way it really is. It's really empty. It is super empty. And the thing that is doing the looking at what is empty is also empty. That can be scary. Radical emptiness of the Dharma can be kind of scary. It's so empty. There's no feeling in the Dharma realm whatsoever until the Bodhisattva says, exactly, precisely, because there's nothing to get, and yet we are so confused in the midst of it, and we throw ourselves after stuff that we think is going to finally pay off, and it doesn't, and it hurts. I want people to wake up to the true emptiness in the midst of wonderful existence and set us on the path to waking others up. That way we can weed our garden skillfully and come up with these incredible blooms and fruits that beautify the world and feed people. So there are skillful gardeners with the knowledge of emptiness who are out there working hard, sweating to make their garden better this year, right? Knowing it's empty. You eat your fill, you're not hungry anymore, you'll be hungry tomorrow. All right. There we go. Now, I have one more thing I wanted to share, which is I found something really lovely. In a translation of praise to the goddess Saraswati. Isn't that funny? We do in our morning chanting, we have what are called the 10 small mantras. And there's one, Namo Photo, Namo Damo, Namo Sangche, Namo Shirli, Moha, Tibi. That's number 10 out of the 10 small mantras. And it's said to be Jishang Tian. We translate it as the good goddess mantra. And it's interesting, how did that find its way into our 10 small mantras that we chant it every morning? And one day, Shifu had given me the job of lecturing twice a day to a group of lay people who were so courageous in coming and listening twice a day to some beginning monk blabber on about something that he half understood and then translate for himself into Mandarin, which is worse, more punishment for these kind-hearted lay people who were supporting beginning monks learning their trade, beginning lecturers. And I was, at that particular day, I was at wit's end. I didn't have any gas in the tank to sit there for 90 minutes and blabber on in 2 languages. And Shifu said, okay. He said, here's what you do. He said, there is a deva whose name is Saraswati. In Chinese, her name is Biancai Tiannu, the goddess of eloquence, the female deva of eloquence, Devi. She's Biancai Tiannu. And if she is very compassionate. She is an emanation of Guanyin Bodhisattva. She has 4 arms. She has a musical instrument in her hands called a veena. She's got recitation beads. She has a sutra, and she has a vase of water, and she has a peacock or birds around her. And he said, if you are stuck for anything to say, you say Namo Piensai Tianyu, you recite her mantra, and the eloquence you need will come to you. She is the deva who is in charge of knowledge, music, and mastery of speech, eloquence. He said, you recite her mantra, Namo Photo, Namo Dhammo, Namo Sangche, and you will find the words you need. He said, that's my secret, pass it on to you, he said. So I'm like, oh, thank you, sir. So I started looking for more information about Piensai Tianyu. And here she is. And I'm sorry we can't, you could turn my screen around so you can see it. Here is Piensai Tianyu. Let me show you one of the better ones. Here she is. There is Piensai Tianyu. Can't show you. So you have to watch the broadcast on YouTube. There she is. There she is. She's got her 4 arms. She's got her signet full lotus. She's got her veena. There's actually an Indian musical instrument called a Saraswati veena and the Mohan veena. And there she is. She's got her beads, her sutra, her bird. There's the bird in the background. And the interesting thing about Saraswati is Hindus, her most familiar appearance is in the Hindu pantheon. She's looks, like a Hindu deva, and she's a goddess in the Hindu tradition. But she all over Asia and Southeast Asia, she is celebrated by multiple traditions. The Tibetans really spend a lot of time with Saraswati. Here I have a child's drawing of Saraswati here in crayon. Beautiful illustration of her swan. Is this a hamsa, or is it a peacock, or is it a cockatoo? It might be a sulfur-crested cockatoo who hangs around with Saraswati. Anyway, I found a beautiful praise to Saraswati, which I wanted to share with everybody. Translated out of Tibetan, here it is, by a man named Lowell Cook. I found this online. And just out of gratitude to Saraswati, the Devi, who has saved my bacon multiple times, I wanted to say thank you to Saraswati and say, this is in praise of the glorious goddess Saraswati. In the path that leads to awakening the victors and their heirs, masters of the Dharma, and the multitudes of wisdom mandalas arranged in successive layers of knowing, in these we seek refuge. Homage to you, glorious goddess Saraswati. Your mastery over speech is renowned throughout the world. You've transcended the 3 knowledges of the sages. All of this is the result of your vast practices. You take up the burden of immense activities and joyfully endure every hardship for the benefit of beings, coursing through the levels and the 10 perfections. Standing steadfast in stores of virtue, you take whatever form is needed. Your rounded face is the flawless moon in full. Your lustrous eyes of compassion open the eyes of others. As you gaze at length upon every last universe effortlessly, it is before you that the likes of Devendra and Brahma bow down. Compassionate mother, replete with love and patience, it is your delight, noble goddess, to nurture every single being. Your eloquence is lofty, your top-knot rivals mountain peaks. Your wisdom runs deep as you act in support of knowledge. Wielding mastery over fields of knowledge, you are the patroness of words, as you are the God of all gods in the universe, and a supreme companion who endeavors to dispel our suffering. Even extremist scholars, existence or emptiness, right, bow down before you. Your limbs are well proportioned, your voice is ever sweet. poised with majesty, you glow with flawless qualities of merit. As it is you who grants the accomplishments of the highest knowledge, grant us swift intellect, retention of words, and eloquence most supreme. With the welfare of every being always in your heart, eminent and unfailing goddess, you dwell in liberation. Firm in your promises, you consider with grace those who call upon you, you fulfill their every wish. As the master of sound, you capture in words everything that appears in the universe. You're understood by all and skilled in expression, O Saraswati. Your capabilities are inconceivable. Wielding mastery over the might of Dharani and Dharma, you, a capable rishi, have genuinely mastered the Samaya. Bestowing your blessing on our bodies, minds, and speech, you work to satisfy the world with your ever-pleasing voice. You're admired by all for your conduct of supreme awakening. Blessed Lady, please continue always to grant the supreme purpose to those who desire the boon of pure body, speech, and mind, with which to bring about the perfect benefit of beings. Help us to be brave as we strive along the path to awakening. Let our tongues be quick and our words be righteous. Endow us with treasures of knowledge and speech unobstructed. Allow us to achieve the full eloquence of all the well-gone ones. And finally, the last verse. Mother of knowledge, your nature is devoid of conceptuality. The flag of your reputation flutters in the winds of joy. Like wanting to draw a picture in the sky, your attributes are hard to comprehend, and your qualities are boundless. Namo Bhagavate Brahmane Namaha Sarasvatyai Devi Siddhyantu Mantra Padam Brahmana Mantra Svaha. There we go. Praise of the glorious goddess Saraswati, not Sravasti. Sravasti is a city. Saraswati. How about that? You heard it here. You can go, if you heard that and appreciated it, your time was well spent. I'm going to invite the monks of the Berkeley Monastery to join in. Is it Jin Chuan? Is it Jin Wei? To let us know what's happening at Berkeley and how. Who is that? That's Jin Wei, sure?
Jin Chuan.
Oh, that's Jin Chuan. Hi. How was Ulambana at Berkeley Monastery?
Very nice. We had our ceremony online, and we had a couple of people. Also, we had some people show up as well, but we masked and try to keep distanced. And you can see a recording of it online on the very top of the website.
All right.
And you can see our ceremony recited in English, Chinese, and English for the Ulambana ceremony. So
okay. 3 times.
3 times. And Jing Forshi gave a little talk on Ulambana and a little bit about how it's misunderstood as Ghost Month in Chinese culture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Love it.
We have coming up the Great Compassion Mantra Dedication of Merit, August 28th, 6:30 to 7:30. This has been ongoing since the pandemic has begun. And so it's been maybe 2 years now, longer, I think. And we, I think, almost have about 1/3 recitations every month.
Oof.
So a lot of people reciting together.
Okay.
The next event is actually a special event that's happening on Thursday, September 1st, hosted by DRBU, titled Why Do We Feel Lonely? And it's going to be a conversation with Doug Powers, who I think everyone knows here. He's also very much part of Berkeley Buddhist Monastery and has lots of interesting reflections and insights. But I think the idea is to have it be a kind of a dialogue. So some of the younger generation DRBU faculty and staff and students probably have a conversation with Doug about some of the current issues facing people. Loneliness being one of them, I'm sure, because of the pandemic and isolation that people might feel.
Or a profound understanding of emptiness.
Or profound, yeah, exactly. Maybe having a profound insight like the Ecclesiastes.
Okay.
Yeah, everything's just meaningless. What am I doing with my life?
It's vain.
Don't want to do all in vain. Yeah. So then if you want to apply for DRBU, you could see that there's an application process. Want to come this fall 2022, but you can do it 2023. We're happily to have students come in.
Okay, DRBU, great.
Below are kind of repeats. So if you want recordings of our online events, if you want to see Reverend Sher's lecture from 1 to 2 p.m., just below. Just keep scrolling down. Yeah. Song of Enlightenment that was mentioned today, 1 to 2 p.m. And Gene Fosher is also reciting every day from 12:30 to 1. You can see how happy he is there reciting. So you can join him in the afternoon reciting the Buddha's name. And also we've been having more people meditating on Thursdays and Fridays. So if people would like, please come on Thursday and Fridays for our morning and evening meditation.
So how's that going now that you've reopened to that point?
It's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
We have this week particularly, I saw more people come, like 4 or 5 people came. Yeah, we're starting to get more and more people. I think definitely we're thinking about how do we open up Berkeley more so that I think people who miss being able to come to the monastery get a chance to come.
Right. What are the controls you have in place, the protocols so that you can meditate safely?
Right now, which I think we want to review, but we ask people to come vaccinated and also wear a mask. So if people come, we just ask them to be able to say their vaccination card or or they can register and then just wear a mask when they're inside.
And you only have to do that once we know
once we know that
that's it. You're good. Okay. Yeah. And then people sit separate in the hall, separated?
Yeah, about 3 feet apart.
Mm-hmm. And it works. That way people can be in the Buddha hall meditating and safely and not be afraid they're going to get infected. And we're bit by bit heading back towards our previous, pre-COVID setup. Okay.
That's it.
Okay.
Amitofo.
Amitofo. All right. Thanks for the report. Great. Okay. It is time now to transfer the merit, and we have Medicine Buddha's mantra that we use now. COVID is, Australia is funny. We went for so long here in Queensland with the fewest cases on the planet of COVID. And now, if you look at a map, we're the hotspot in the entire world for COVID infections. So that's how it goes. And I went out last week and found myself singing a Hebrew folk song with Rabbi Cohen and his wife Gila in Hebrew. And when I was sitting amid our interfaith crowd, I recited Medicine Buddha's mantra, so my heart didn't feel yinny and vulnerable, and also so I could feel like I was radiating goodness to the people around me and contributing to a healthier environment. So learning and reciting this Medicine Buddha mantra in Sanskrit is a really good practice. We use this to transfer merit. Please share any goodness you would like to send out to living beings. Arahate Samyak Sambuddhaya Tadyata Asaji Asaji Aisaja Samukate Swaha Bhagavate Aisaja Arahate Jaya Prabharachaya Tagataya Arahate Samyak Sambuddhaya Yata. Last chance. Asaji, 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 Sangate Swaha. And I'll invite everybody to join me in bowing to the Buddha here. Do a first bow. And a second bow. Third bow. Bow in respect to the Venerable Master. And third bow. Alrighty, that's going to do it for us for today. We'll see you all next week. Amitofo. Be well.